Hey, welcome to Youth TV. Thanks for joining us. My name is Isaiah and it's great to be with you guys today. I hope you guys are doing good and I miss seeing you guys. During this series, Zach was going to be interviewing some people with expertise in specific areas and learning alongside us. In today's video, he's sitting down with Lyndon, a former worship pastor, to ask about worship, why does it matter, and how do we approach it during lockdown. Looking forward to hearing about it, and I hope this video is helpful for you this week. Enjoy.
Well, thanks for joining us for an episode of Youth TV. This is a good friend of mine, Lyndon. Lyndon is a connections pastor at Central Heights Church. Some of you might recognize him from Stillwood Camp. He's been a speaker there a number of times.
Codename Fossil.
Codename Fossil. He also has the distinction of being my mom's favorite worship leader.
Oh, boy.
Believe it or not.
That's pressure.
So there you go. Lyndon has been a worship leader for years and years and a worship pastor for 12 years, I think. And you are also Josiah's dad.
That's right.
So we know you have patience.
Yep, and he has lots of patience for his dad too, so it's all good. We learn from each other.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with us. Yep. We want to talk about worship. You've been a mentor of mine. You're someone I look up to in a lot of ways, and someone that when you speak, I listen. So I look forward to, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have some of your words recorded so I can go back and listen to them later and welcome some of my friends from youth in on what you have to say.
I would imagine I might make a meme or two as well, right?
Yeah, we might get a couple screen grabs that'll live forever here.
Sticker here and there.
That's great. Yeah, move over Bernie Sanders.
Yeah,
We've got the new sheriff in town.
I need my mittens.
Yeah. So we're going to start with a big question.
Sure.
Some of us might think there's a really quick answer to this, but I know your answer is going to be a little bit bigger. What is worship?
Well, worship is one of those things that if you look at what the Bible has to say, there's kind of two words in the Greek that we kind of look at. I'm not going to give you the words, but the gist of what they're talking about in those words is two kind of word pictures. One is like to kiss the hand. So if you had a king and you were his subject, the idea would be to show reverence and awe by walking up and kiss towards or kiss his hand and say, I'm in awe of you, I'm in reverence of you, I'm under your authority. So that's one. And the other kind of gives the picture of actually bowing, kind of face down to the ground. Like I'm your subject, I'm honoring you, I'm putting you in the first place. You're the king, I'm not. I'm one of your underlings. It's a hard concept to understand in Western culture, in the culture you guys live in, because we don't really have people that we worship.
No, I don't think so.
No, not really, because we have, in some cultures they have a king, or they, like we have in Britain, we have a queen. So you're supposed to bow, or you're supposed to do all these things. We have places where we might go, man, that's an awesome person. And when you're in the room, like, oh, Zach Mellis is here. Like, I want to be, close to Zach.
Zach Mellis is here. Where are the exits?
Yeah. So worship is being able to put yourself in a place where you recognize you're under, in this case, God, and putting him in his rightful place of authority, honor. He is who we kind of submit ourselves to, surrender ourselves to. Our place is in the right spot. He is in authority over us. So that's how I would define worship, just because you can get into all the technical stuff, but I think it's just good to have those two pictures.
Right on. Now, the spirit of that makes sense to me. When I think of worship, when I think of a worship team, I think of a group of musicians. When I think of spending time worshiping, I think of singing. So talk to me about musical worship. What is its place? Where does it come into that picture?
Right. So I think the problem we have, and just before I kind of comment on that, worship can sometimes be defined as singing songs. Mm-hmm. It's way more than that, because singing songs can be worship, but worship is an attitude of the heart, kind of like I described before, where I'm saying, all right, so God, I'm acknowledging that you are over me, that you love me, but that you're also holy and powerful and should be revered, as it were. So musical worship is kind of that opportunity that we have to use not only our words, but get beyond just our brains, our thinking, and sometimes engage in the emotions, and being able to sing a love song sometimes, a song of honor, but it kind of gets past just your thinking and allows us to present ourselves at the heart level. So if you think about what music does, you go to watch a movie sometime. If you ever take a movie and pull all the music out,
way different experience.
Oh my goodness, crazy. And you go, what happened? And then all of a sudden you start to hear music, or like I've heard certain songs, say from the Lord of the Rings, which I love, and I'm drawn immediately back to that scene in the movie because I heard the music. So music is one of those gifts I believe that God has given us to be able to help us engage not just our intellect, but our emotions, our hearts, to pour out emotion to Him, and to engage it on a deeper level. And there's certain scriptures that talk about sing a new song to the Lord, or let the instruments play loud. So it's obviously that God intended for us to use sounds and to engage our emotions. Emotions aren't bad. Mm-hmm. We don't want to just say, emotions, don't trust emotions. Emotions are part of how God's given us to express ourselves, to be able to be in relationship. So if we have emotions in relationships, man to man to woman, why wouldn't we have those same types of emotions, God to us and us to God? We talk about how God loves us and He has compassion on us. God gets angry. So an emotion shouldn't be avoided. Obviously, it has to be controlled and channeled in the right direction, but it's part of how we connect with God.
That's really beautiful that you brought that up, because our last video was a discussion about mental health. And Kat Anderson, our counselor, brought up the idea that emotions are part of who we are, and bringing those to God honestly in prayer is something that honors Him, because He made us to have our emotions, and He isn't afraid of them.
That's right.
So that's really neat that comes up again in a whole different context. Right. Now, when we simplify it a little bit, and let's say view worship as entertainment, or a performance, or an experience where it's just something that I watch and am impressed by. If that's my attitude, what am I missing out on?
The whole point. One of the reasons I think that we've allowed music and worship to become entertainment is because we have a very small picture of who it is that we're worshiping. So I love the Marvel movies and Avengers, and there's this one scene that just continually brings me back to how I think we view God. Loki's up top in the Stark Towers, and Hulk and him are having a confrontation, and Loki stands up and kind of puffs up his chest and says something like, "I'm a god." And Hulk, without even breathing, just grabs him by the foot and just pounds him back and forth on the ground. And I'm just laughing. And as he leaves him kind of on the ground in the heap, he just walks up and says, "Puny God." And I think sometimes we've gotten so comfortable with saying God loves me that we forget who it is we're talking about. Now, there's a tension to be held there, because God's love for us doesn't change. But when you say the word God, we forget who He is. So if it's okay, I want to just read a little section from Revelation, because
please do.
It was actually shared with us at our church service this morning. But so this is a picture in the beginning, in the last book of the Bible, Revelation, and this is how they describe Jesus. So when I turn to see, I'll tell you where it's from, Revelation 1, verse 12, and right through to 18. So when I turned to see who was speaking to me, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and standing in the middle of the lampstands was someone like the Son of Man, Jesus. He was wearing a long robe with a gold sash across his chest. His head and his hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like flames of fire. Okay, this isn't just like, my buddy. His feet were like polished bronze, refined in a furnace, and his voice thundered like mighty ocean waves. He held 7 stars in his right hand, and a sharp 2-edged sword came out of his mouth, and his face was like the sun in all of its brilliance. Like, that's a pretty crazy picture, but this is what happens next. So John, the author of this book, says, "And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as if I were dead." We don't have a very good picture of God as somebody who can inspire that kind of a response. But the reality is, He is that God. And when we think about worshiping, it's way too easy to forget who it is that we're addressing. So when we let worship become about me, and worship becomes, I didn't like that song, or I didn't like that drum beat, or I didn't like, the electric guitar was to this, to that, whatever, or that's old fogey music. We're forgetting that it's not about us. It's actually a tool for us to demonstrate our love and surrender to God. So we miss the point if music and the love of music and our preferences in music is how we come, arms crossed, kind of like, impress me. So, for instance, our family went to Africa in 2007, and we sang with a bunch of Christians who were in a very small nomadic tribe. The only instrument they had was a can bent up, filled with rocks. It was a shaker. But it was an incredibly powerful experience, because you look around the people and they're crying out at the top of their lungs because they don't have a lot. But they're saying, God, we have you. And so we worship you as the one who we surrender to, because you're all we got. And a shaker.
Now that ties really well into the description of worship you gave, which is kind of realizing and submitting yourself to who God is. And then music has a place as a tool to get yourself to that realization.
That's right.
So talk to me about someone who might say, I don't enjoy music. It doesn't really do it for me. I'm not interested in music. Yep. I don't care for Christian karaoke. Is that person still meant to worship?
Absolutely.
Should they just tune out for half an hour during a service? Or talk to someone who is in those shoes.
I have those people in my life. I think we also have to understand that worship, again, is more about our heart attitude than it is about our actual what we do. So if I sit in a worship service with my arms crossed and go, this is stupid, let's get this over with, I'm missing the point. But there are words. There is truth. You can listen, you can engage, you can even, worship without singing a word. If you choose to raise your hands, you can raise your hands in abandonment and say, God, I acknowledge you, even though at this point my musical interest is very, very limited. In fact, there's a gentleman in our church, his name is John Balzer, and he is this elderly guy that has as much life and energy. He's constantly saying, praise the Lord. The guy can't sing a note. And he always jokes about the fact that when he gets to heaven, he's actually going to finally be able to sing.
That's awesome.
But he engages with his heart because he recognizes it's not about singing a beautiful song. It's about turning my focus to God and saying, God, I'm going to give you a sacrifice of praise, tell you how much I need you. And honestly, worship is about me reminding myself in whatever way that I'm not God.
Now, worship has become a big part of your lifestyle.
Sure.
Talk to me about the difference that makes for you personally. Since worship has become something that you've valued,
Yeah.
What's changed?
I think it's really hard to worship if we believe that really there's nothing that God offers me.
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
So when I think about my own personal journey, one of the things that's happened to me over the years, I used to ask a question, and I asked my lead pastor this when he first came about 7-8 years ago. I said, Tim, tell me if what would Jesus do is a good question, because that's kind of what I'm talking about right now. If you want me to worship, then, well, what would Jesus do? That's how I worship. He said to me, Lyndon, it's not a bad question, but it's definitely not a good first question. So I said, okay, tell me more. He says, well, the better first question is with the letters, what has Jesus done? WHJD. He says, if we don't quite understand what we've been saved from and who God is, this big holy God that I tried to describe to you before, and how that holy God gave up who he was, sent his son Jesus down specifically. I'll give you an example from Philippians 2. It says, though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. We're talking about Jesus here. And when he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. That thing we talk about in the church, Jesus dying on the cross, if we can gain deep insight and have a revelation in our heart about what that truly means, like think about the creator of the universe coming to this earth to save you and me when you and me were basically flipping him the bird. Like, I don't care about you. I don't really want to be under your authority. I don't want to be loved by you. I just want to be God myself. And yet God, who could have basically taken and just gone the old hellfire missile and just gone, and we'll start over, chose instead to, we use this term in the church, redeem, to bring back together, to purchase back what it is that he created in the first place. So a life verses for me have come from Ephesians 2:10, and I'll try and be brief with this, but it starts in Ephesians 2. Once you were dead because of your disobedience and your many sins, you used to live in sin just like the rest of the world, obeying the devil, the commander of the power in the unseen world. He is the spirit at work in the hearts of those who refuse to obey God. All of us, every one of us, used to live that way, following the passionate desires and inclinations of our sinful nature. By our very nature, we were subject to God's anger, just like everybody else. So if I read that and I go, well, that means that I am basically, God's wrath, God's anger is on me, and there's nothing I can do to get rid of it. But my favorite two words in the Bible come next. Verse 4, but God. God is so rich in mercy, and he loved us so much that even though we were dead because of our sins, he gave us life when he raised Christ from the dead. It is only by God's grace that you've been saved. For he raised us up from the dead along with Christ and seated us with him in the heavenly realms because we are united with Christ. And then verse 8, God saved you by his grace when you believed, and you can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. So then what? Verse 10, for we are God's masterpiece. Think about that. God, the creator of the universe, looks at you guys and says, you're my masterpiece, not some piece of junk I found on the heap. I created you with a desire and a purpose. And then it says, and he has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. It's like I said, instead of wiping us out because of sin, which is the wages of sin is death, he says, no, I love you enough to sacrifice myself for you to be able to be restored, to be my masterpiece, and to have a purpose. So for me, in that 7 or 8 year journey, I was like, I used to talk about that, and I said, if I ever got a tattoo, it would say this: what has Jesus done? WHJD. And so I actually did that, and I love it because it's given me a constant reminder of what's my motivation for worshiping, both through the musical part and the time when I declare my heart to God, but also through the worship through service and the worship through loving others, especially people that are hard to love. It's what has Jesus done? And on it talks about God is rich in mercy and he has lavish grace for me. That's the compass by which I want to live my life. And it's the compass that points me back to a life of worship where I can go, I am going to put God in his rightful spot. And he then puts me back in the spot which is mine, which is under his protection, under his care, under his love, under his authority, which we were never meant to be out of. That's where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
But we have this idea, and it comes right from Genesis, that we could be gods. That's way above our pay grade.
That's so good. Lyndon, thank you for just bringing the gospel in response to that question. That is a story that I will never grow tired of hearing, and always puts, I think everyone gets a little more wind in their sails when they're reminded of their place in the big story of what it means to be human. Yeah. Now, there's two things I want to dig into. First of all, I want to see this tattoo. Okay. I mean, I've seen it, but I want everyone else to see it.
Well, it's on here. So we get a...
Yeah, just roll that sleeve up there. We'll bring the camera in for a close-up in a bit here. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That turned out real nice.
That's a friend of mine gave me the money for that. He sent his 4-year-old with a little gift card and said, if you've talked about this thing long enough, go and get it. So...
Oh, that's awesome. Well, it turned out great.
Thanks.
And then the second thing I wanted to pull out of that was the difference between those two questions. What would Jesus do and what has Jesus done? One difference that really stands out to me is one focuses on what we can do and generating kind of on our own energy some sort of a performance. And I think of the difference when I put myself in the shoes of someone worshiping. If I'm thinking of this, what would Jesus do? I got to worship the way Jesus would worship. So I got to generate this and create this energy or feeling on my own. And my response to that personally is, that's pressure and I don't know if I can do it. And the second picture you gave us of what has Jesus done allows us to sit back and observe something and respond to it. And there still is action. There still is momentum taken in response to what Jesus has done. But I don't feel this pressure of synthesizing and creating some energy on my own. Instead, it's kind of like a conversation like we're having now, where our words are in response to one another. As we look at what Jesus has done, we have something to say in response. I feel inspired right now in this moment, and I'd love to invite 10 people to the church or 10 people to my house, gather around a piano and sing some songs. And that's not legal or safe right now. So if I want to worship, do I have to wait until summer or fall or until orders change? Or can I be a worshipful person this afternoon?
Oh, yeah.
And if so, how do I do it?
I find some of the best worship times are happening when I'm on my own and music comes on. So quick example of that. This summer I had the privilege of going to Quebec to pick up my 3-wheel motorcycle, it's called a Can-Am Spider, and I had such fun because I just picked it up there, bought it out in Quebec, and drove it all the way back.
Tattoos and motorcycles. You are so much cooler than me, Lyndon.
It's midlife crisis. Everybody tells me that. So as I was driving along, I was kind of going north, and I was around Lake Superior, and I had stopped because I hadn't taken a lot of video yet. So I'm standing on the pegs of my bike, and I'm looking at this gorgeous view of this Lake Superior and the surrounding areas, and I'm taking video. And all of a sudden, a song came on. The song just asks the question, is he worthy? And I got completely wrecked. Like, just where the emotion came, I was standing literally on my pegs of my bike with my arms in the air, helmet on, jacket on, and I'm sure if anybody drove by, they must have thought I was completely on drugs. But that was one of those tender moments when I was reminded again of who it was that made all that I was seeing, who made it possible and loved me enough for me to even experience that. You can actually speak your worship to God by even journaling, by writing things down. For me, I think also recognizing that you can go one-on-one, go for a walk in the bush somewhere, or maybe if with groups of two, but having your headphones in and being able to play songs that inspire you, songs that remind you of the truth, that remind you of who God says you are and who He is. And then the other part of it is recognizing that we can sit back and sort of make the excuse, I can't worship in this way. But for instance, when I talk with Josiah, some of the best ways that he worships is by serving others. You know, where he's able to go, oh, I have an opportunity, I see a need, and I'm going to go meet that need. Some of the times when I have felt the most grateful to God is when I've been able to kind of behind the scenes walk up to somebody, drop an anonymous envelope in their hands. Hey, somebody told me to give you this, and there's something in it that they need. Oh, then being able to worship God, say, God, thank you for the opportunity for me to express to you through this act that I love you and I'm thankful for all you've done. So worship doesn't have to be songs. Maybe you can come up with some other creative ways that you can say, God, I place you in the highest place. Those are some things I would suggest you can at least think about.
And that sounds entirely possible. Yeah. And I think it'll be fun as a group to maybe continue this discussion and see what different ideas we have, because I think there's going to be some different conclusions people come to. Right. This is what I do to remind myself of my place in God's kingdom. Yep. So I'm looking forward to hearing different people's answers to that. Are there any kind of final thoughts or final encouragements you want to leave us with today?
I think the most important thing I would want you to remember is that worship is way more about your heart posture and position and attitude than it is about the actions. You know, we talked about that scene where John fell flat on his face after seeing this great vision. Well, the reality is, as soon as he did that, the first thing that Jesus said to him was, "Fear not." In other words, come to me. Come to me with everything you got, not with, oh, I got to get cleaned up and prettied up, but come boldly into my presence. Come with your questions. Come with your challenges. Come with your kind of your muck. That's worship, when you stand there and go, God, this is who I am. This is what I am. I don't have it all figured out, but I'm going to love you and I'm going to follow you. I'm going to trust you and I'm going to let you be the one who sees me and values me and sends me out in the midst of my mess. So with worship, don't feel like you got to get prettied up. Just come as you are.
Well, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining us this week. If you want to get in touch with us, our website and social accounts are linked in the description. We'd love to pray for you and support you however we can. Have a great week.